Welcome to M9 Prime Gaming, and this is my thoughts on Synapse. Synapse is one of the best VR games I have played to date. Mind you, I haven't played that many games, but I can tell you that Synapse is definitely on the top two. That is not a driving game like Gran Turismo, and it is not a full-priced $80, $79 Canadian game. It is, I think, priced at about $50 Canadian, so probably about $40 American, give or take a couple dollars for inflation and conversion. Either way, it's not like a full-priced game that you can get. It's slightly lower, still on the high end for a VR game compared to like those $10 games that you see. Anyhow, so let me get to my thoughts on this game. First of all, when you start the game, you are just running around on a beach. Everything's in color. And the premise is you are a secret agent and you have to infiltrate a guy's mind. So you land on the beach and this guy's in this machine and you basically Matrix style jack into this machine and you're inside the guy's mind. Your right hand, you hold your weapon. Left hand at the beginning does nothing. Eventually you get telekinesis. But you do have to die a couple times. It is a roguelike game, so every run is slightly different. However, they don't exactly have procedurally generated maps. You do get them in a different order. Sometimes you'll spawn in different spots on the map. Like there's a couple maps that are multi-level. Sometimes you'll spawn on the bottom. Sometimes you'll spawn on the top. It's pretty random, so it keeps it fresh. The first couple playthroughs that you're going to die a bunch of times because you're not very powerful. You can't even use telekinesis, which is a huge part of this game, and that's what makes it so fantastic. You start off with a pistol, slowly you get a submachine gun, and then you get a shotgun, and finally a grenade launcher. So there's only 4 weapons, but they all have their pluses and minuses. Obviously, grenade launcher is the most damage, but it's slowest. It shoots grenades. The shotgun for further away doesn't really do much. And all of these are upgradable, I think up to 5 levels of upgrades. So they do more damage, more capacity, quicker reloads, quicker fire rate, all that stuff. The way the graphics are designed, it is pretty much, I would say grayscale. I'm not going to say black and white. Everything is pretty gray. Which at first you're going to be like, oh, that doesn't look very appealing. Like, I mean, this is kind of boring for a VR game. I'm all in gray. But it is what makes this game so fantastic. The enemies are coming at you. And the big part is they have traces of color. And it really draws your eye. It makes this so much easier to spot stuff. There's boxes, there's upgrades, everything. It just has a pop of color and your eye is drawn to it. It is such a great game design. And the way it's explained is you're in someone's mind. This is how they perceive everything. So it's not like weird because it's all fictional. And that's also why you get the telekinesis, because it's like you're supposed to be a real person inside someone's mind, controlling things with your mind. So everything is a projection. And it works so well. I love it. I love how the colors just draw your eye. I love how things come at you and you can react. It's a very good way of designing the levels. It really does help you get through it, and it does make you focus on the important parts. The other thing is the environments are totally climbable up to a certain point. So if you use L1 and R1, you can grab the walls with your hands and climb up. You can go a couple feet up. Sometimes they'll put barricades in your way and you can actually just climb the wall beside the barricade to get over it. It's kind of like it stops the enemies from coming through, but it doesn't stop you. But while you're climbing, you can't shoot really. I mean, you can hold one hand on the wall when you're high up and the other hand to shoot, and it works really well. I also do enjoy the way they did the reloading. In games like Resident Evil, you have to use your left hand, or if you're right-handed, basically your one hand holds the gun in Resident Evil, the other hand you grab a clip and you put it in the gun. And that motion, it doesn't work for me. I was so clumsy when I was trying it. In this game, you push circle or you empty the clip and your magazine pops out of the gun and it just floats there. And all you have to do is use your left hand to push it in. However, once I started playing and I was getting really good at the game, I didn't even need to use my left hand to push the magazine in. What I would do is be using my left hand to control things with telekinesis and use my right hand to slam the magazine down on my forearm, and that will push it back in. It works so well. It was like second nature. I'm like, oh, it's empty, pop, goes right back in. I'm back to shooting and holding guys with telekinesis. It works so well. Unfortunately, you do have to play a little bit to start unlocking the powers. The more you play, the more powers you unlock, the funner the game gets. So at the beginning, all you get is a pistol, kind of boring. Then you get telekinesis where you can pick up a box. Makes it better, but still not great because you can't pick up enemies. Eventually you have these challenges that you do. So there's a challenge like kill 50 enemies, or make it through a section without getting hit, or make it through a section without firing a gun, stuff like that. And or like the other one is spend so much defiance, which is your currency that you're playing with during your run. So that's the stuff you spend as you're doing your run on your upgrades, or more ammo, or more health, and that basically gets reset every time you die. So basically anything you do in the game gives you points, and then once you fill up the bar, you get credits that you can use for upgrades. And there's 3 upgrade paths that you can do. One of them is for guns, one of them is for health, and the other one is for your psychic powers. And once you get a few of those upgrades, this game becomes so fun to get in it, to just be able to do a run. There was a couple times where I'm like, you know what, I'll do like a half hour, a quick run, and then I find myself doing 3-4 runs in a row, and I'm like 2.5, 3 hours of game. I'm like, shoot, I gotta go to bed. It's addictive how fun it gets. The other thing that they do is after you beat a section, because it's basically split up into your subconscious and the conscious, and you have a bunch of levels where you have waves of enemies that come at you. For every wave or every map that you beat, you go to this like mirror looking thing, and it's a portal to the next section. And usually when you go through it, before you get to go through it, they give you 2 upgrades to choose between. And these upgrades could be like the last shot in your gun is a grenade, or anyone you hold with telekinesis will fight for you. The power up that I found was super useful. The most useful of all of them was whoever you hold with telekinesis, the enemies will shoot that person. So it takes all the aggro off of you, especially in the later levels, and it lets that person or that enemy take all the fire, which is fantastic, especially if you can do it to like one of the higher level enemies that have a lot of health, because that enemy that you use your telekinesis on will still want to shoot you, but everyone will want to shoot them. So that gives you a window of opportunity to take out a couple more guys or reposition yourself to somewhere more favorable to you. And you can really get through a lot of the tougher fights, especially later on in the game. The game throws a lot of enemies at you. This really takes the focus off of you and lets you basically wreck everybody. There are basically 3 main types of enemies. Well, 4. There's the grunts with the guns. Then there's these guys with flaming skulls for heads that run at you. When they get close, they do a T-pose and yell and explode. Those guys killed me a lot, that's for sure. You get the brutes. These guys are basically, if you know Marvel movies, think of Juggernaut. It's a big guy, holds a minigun, lots of armor. First time I fought him, didn't know what to do. It killed me. I had no chance. And then I figured out that you can use your telekinesis to pull the armor off. Then there's a weak spot, and then you shoot the weak spot, or you throw stuff at the weak spot, and that guy has a lot of health. And then the final enemy that they throw at you is called a sentinel, which are flying enemies that shoot lasers at you. They're not that dangerous, they're just annoying, but I did find that there's only usually 2. I don't remember if there was ever 3, but only 2 guys at once will be engaging with you. And then if there's more of these sentinels, they'll be extra high in the air, and they will not be able to shoot you. They're just there, so when you kill one, they pop down to the lower level, and then they start engaging with you. So the enemy variety is not the biggest, but these guys also come in different levels, like level 1, level 2, level 3. The higher the level, the more health they have, and I guess the more aggressive they can be. My favorite is the brutes because they are at first very, very tough, and later when you get your grenade launcher and you get more power-ups, they're actually quite fun to fight, and they still give you a good challenge, but they are totally manageable. And they also throw things at you. They'll throw a box at you, they'll throw exploding barrels at you. And the funny thing is, once, at least the first time, I thought it was like hilarious and it caught me really off guard. He picked up a grunt and threw him at me. So he threw another enemy right at me. And I was like, what is happening? So that was just hilarious to see the first time. Sorry if I spoiled it for you, but they can throw anything that you can throw. That's all I'll say. Running around in this game is pretty fun. You use the control stick to run around, and you look around normally, and then you use the right stick to basically turn your whole body about, I think, 15 to 20 degrees. If you've played other VR games, it uses very similar controls. The first time I played it, I'll be honest, I had lots of motion sickness. I didn't have my VR legs under me yet. But once I had a few runs in me, I was able to basically play longer without getting sick. I do find personally my worst VR sickness comes from changing height. So there's a couple of places where you basically ride an elevator. That made me queasy at first, but by the time I was done with the game, I was no longer getting queasy with that. Same thing with jumping down from high up. There's no fall damage, so it's a good way to switch from like a high position to a lower position, either to run away from something or to chase something down. And when I first started playing the game, I was actually closing my eyes because it was making me so sick. As long as I didn't see the fall, my body wouldn't react. But I got so used to this game that I was able to move around pretty freely. Apart from very intense action where I was doing a lot of movement, I was perfectly fine playing this game. And even with intense movement, it wasn't that I was getting sick. I was actually, my body was thinking I was moving, and it was compensating for the movement. And I would almost feel like I'm tipping over a little bit, and I would catch myself. It was the weirdest feeling, but I totally I figured out why it was happening very quickly, and I was able to remind myself what was happening, and that went away pretty fast. But the first time it happened, it was because it was just so many enemies coming at me. I was running, then I turned the corner quickly to shoot, and my body thought I was still moving, so it was compensating for the movement, as if I was really stopping. And I ended up just kind of leaning to the left a little bit more than I was comfortable with, and I had to pause the game, take a second, and keep going. And of course, I died on that one. I remember that. Those guys with the flaming skulls ran at me, did the T-pose, blew up, and when they run at you, they make the most awful noises. And when they blow up, they scream and they make it's just, those guys are overwhelming. They're very easy to kill, but they will sneak up on you. Which also brings me to the part of the game, or the part of this video where I talk about the parts where I'm not a huge fan of this game for some of the decisions they've made. First, like I said, those guys can sneak up on you. That's mainly because it's wave based. So you go into the level, you do a couple waves, and when you kill the last guy, they'll spawn the next set of enemies. So it's not like they're all positioned when you spawn in. It's waves inside the level. If you're in the center of the level, they can spawn enemies anywhere you can't see, which also includes behind you. Some levels are larger, so they'll only spawn them in a certain section of the level. But the first couple levels are quite small, so they could spawn from where you started. And if you're not aware of that, they will sneak up behind you, and those guys that yell and blow up will definitely kill you because they do a lot of damage and they are fast. And if you're not aware of it, you're gonna get surprised, especially the first couple times. Later, you'll learn how to navigate the environment to better your position against those kind of guys. Though I was using my Pulse 3D headset, so the 3D sound is very, very good in this game. I was able to hear them behind me, but my reaction time wasn't good, and I didn't oh, there's no way they're from behind me. Maybe they're somewhere above me or below me and behind me. No, they were right behind me. The sound didn't lie. I was just making bad assumptions. The other part that I kind of didn't like is there's no boss enemies, really. I mean, you have the brutes, you have the sentinels, but at the end of the day, when you're on the last level, they just throw more enemies at you. There's not like an enemy that is a final boss that is unique to from everything else. So it does kind of feel boring. Like there's no big payout or big fight that is like crazy to see. Because by the time you're on your third or fourth run, like once you finish the game a couple times, then you will basically not really have much. Like it'll still be a little bit difficult near the end because of the sheer volume of enemies, but you'll know what to do. You know how to deal with every single enemy. You'll probably have the power-ups that you want that will make your run the best it can be, because there's no penalty for restarting a run. So there was near the end, I had the power-up where I had there's no penalty for restarting a run. There is an upgrade that lets you choose a power-up before you actually get into the first level. So what I was doing at one point near the end was basically starting a new run and looking for that power-up that lets me telekinesis an enemy and make everyone shoot them. If I didn't get that, I would just restart the run until I did, and that made a world of difference. And that was because I was just trying to get to the end. I knew that that's the one power-up that was going to get me to where I needed to go, because it is great in a bind. The other part that I wasn't a huge fan of is telekinesis is a big part of the game, and it works great for the most part. Though, when you throw enemies against walls, especially in the earlier levels, you're kind of like cliffs, or there's cliffs around you. I've had it a couple times where I threw the enemy against the cliff and he actually got stuck in the cliff. I had to use my headphones to figure out where this enemy is approximately, and then I use telekinesis to kind of bring him out. Basically grabs the enemy that you're looking at, so I was looking in the general direction, and then a body part of his would stick out and I would shoot that body part and kill it. It happened maybe 2 or 3 times. It was a little bit annoying, but it wasn't game breaking by any chance, and you could always restart the run. In the later levels where things are more sterile, I would say, or there's less cliff faces, you're throwing stuff into walls, those ones are not that bad. As for the controls, they are fantastic the way they do it. It feels so natural. Basically, your your R2 is to shoot, L2 is to use your telekinesis. So shooting the gun, very simple. Pull the trigger, shoot the thing. The adaptive triggers work great. The telekinesis is where the magic happens. When you hold L2 lightly, it's basically there's a stop in the middle. Some items, like the explosive barrels, you can pick up by holding it lightly, and then when you squeeze it all the way down, it explodes it. So it's like you're holding with your mind and then you're squeezing your hand, and it makes the thing blow up. But you can also pick up enemies once you have the proper upgrades, and you can just fling them in the air, you can fling them on the ground, you can fling them against the wall. There was a couple times where I was just having fun in the earlier levels because I was so powerful, where I would fling them up in the air and then shoot them with my gun as they're flying through the air. It was so much fun, and it feels so good. And then later on, you actually have the ability to move things towards you and away from you with their telekinesis as you're holding the object, which makes it so much easier because you can use a box to squish a guy, or you can use a box to block the bullets. And you can also get a power-up that lets you pick up their grenades that they throw at you and just send them right back by just floating them right beside their face and letting them blow up. The telekinesis is just amazing in this game. You can do so much with it, and there are challenges to finish sections of the game without firing a gun. Very, very doable. Very, very fun to do. Also, those sentinel enemies that are flying, you can pull them right down to the ground and shoot them in the face. Not an issue. You have the power. So as you're holding enemies, you're just moving your hand left and right, and that's the way the enemy is going. So pretend you're throwing a ball. That's what's going to happen to the enemy. The enemy is the ball. You're throwing it with your mind. It's so good. And the way the telekinesis aims is by using your eyeballs. So the PlayStation VR2 does eye tracking very, very well. It's not perfect. There's a couple times where items are close together, where it might think you're looking at one and not the other, especially if there's if one's in the background, one's more closer to you. It'll probably target the closer one most of the time. If you're trying to look at the one in the back, it might get a little bit confused. I don't blame it. That's just, the items are very close together. Like, they're on the same, basically they're overlapping, just one's far away, one's close up. It usually goes for the close up one unless you're really focusing on the far away one, like more towards the corner of it, where far away from the close up one. Either way, you look at an enemy and that's where you're aiming. So you can easily shoot a guy while looking somewhere else and pick up another guy and throw him towards the first guy. You can throw an enemy at another enemy. The only ones you cannot throw are the brutes. Basically, you can only use the telekinesis to take off their armor, but I was not able to pick them up or make them fall down or anything like that. They're pretty much, I guess, too big. The other thing I really do want to speak about is the music. It might seem not a big deal, but when you're in the action, the way they do the music just works so well. Like, you feel so good playing and like using your powers and shooting. The music matches the action so well. It's not a huge variety of music, but when the music's going and you're in the action, it just lines up so perfectly. Now, when it comes to the length of the game, the first time I beat the game took me a little bit over an hour and a half, and I was pretty underpowered. I was basically I didn't have a lot of stuff unlocked. The second time I beat the game was just over an hour, like an hour and something seconds, and it was, I'm gonna post it up on the screen. I should have the screenshot still. And every time you beat the game becomes harder. Enemies that were in the later part of the game start showing up in the earlier part of the game. So it does throw a little bit of variety in it. It's not the same thing over and over and over. Basically, by the time you've beat the game twice, you're gonna have every enemy available at all times, and you're gonna definitely have a bit of a challenge to get through everything, but you're also gonna be very powerful. So if they didn't do that, this game would become boring, because the first half of the game you would just walk through, and then the second half you would have a little bit of challenge. This time there's challenge through the whole game, and it is a fair amount of challenge. It's not like they're being unfair to you. Sometimes it does feel like they're being unfair to you, like when they throw 10 of those screaming guys at you that run at you, but they're usually in a group. You shoot one, he dies, explodes, and explodes the rest of them, so it's not a huge deal. Sometimes they'll put 2 brutes against you and a couple of the sentinels, and you know what, it's manageable, but you do have to pick your positioning better, and they will come and charge you, those brutes, so you have to have an escape plan. It makes the game really fun because it's basically an arena shooter, but you have telekinesis and you're only fighting the AI. And again, the way the game is explained, where you're in someone's mind, and as you're going deeper into their mind, there's more protections. It makes perfect sense, and it makes sense why this is happening in a video game way. Like, it's not realistic, but in a video game way, it works perfectly, and it lets this game be as creative as it wants to be and play so well. This game is very fine-tuned for whatever you want to do with the powers that they give you. They don't limit you that you can't do certain things, you can't go certain places. If you can climb up there, you can go there. They do put ladders on the rock walls to kind of indicate where you can climb, but I've climbed away from the ladders and still been able to go all the way to the second floor. Sometimes I'm stopped, sometimes I'm not. It all depends on the actual level and the design, but it's very freeform how you want to play these areas. So my conclusion to all of this is a very, very good VR game, and it plays very, very well on the PSVR2. The ability to aim with your eyes is fantastic. The way they did the reload works so well, because all you do is push it back in, and you can even, like I said, slam it down on your forearm. You'll get the hang of it so fast. You're not fumbling. You're basically, your left hand is a weapon and your right hand is a weapon, and you can use them both together so well. If I had to give this game a rating, everything considered, I would say 9 out of 10. Here's the reason why it's not getting a 10 out of 10 for me. Even though I would really want to give it a 10 out of 10, it's the enemy variety. Again, there's 4 main enemies with different levels. They have a little bit of tweaks to them, but there's no bosses. There's no surprises. Like, there's no final big boss to fight. It's just a lot of enemies at the same time. It is impressive the first couple times you do it, but you kind of want that big set piece, and that's missing. The length of these runs, I think, is perfect. An hour to 2 hours per run to get through the whole game. Beautiful. I'm sure that once you get very powerful, and if you're playing a lot and you're getting into the groove, you can probably get it done 30 minutes to 45 minutes, especially when you get really used to the controls. But I would say an hour is average, and that is a perfect length for a VR game. The way everything controls feels fantastic. Again, telekinesis fantastic. The shooting feels fantastic. Aiming could be a little bit better. It's those small shortcomings that make me give it a 9 instead of a 10. But I will say it's still the best VR game I've played to date. Better than Call of the Mountain. Better than Gran Turismo, though that's in a different... Gran Turismo is a totally different beast. Totally different game. Still fantastic, but again, this, for a pure VR experience, this is the best one I've played. Out of all the ones I've tried, this is the one I had the most fun with. This is the one that made me want to keep going back. This is the one that scratched an itch I didn't know I had. It was addictive in the right way. It was fun in the right way. Wasn't too creepy. And it basically controlled so well. It ran so well. Everything, the art style, the music, everything just works so well together. But it had those small little missing parts, and I would give it 9.5, but my rating scale is from 0 to 10. No in-betweens. Whole numbers only. So 9 out of 5. But if you're looking for a game to play on your PSVR2, this game is fantastic, and it goes on sale often for like 30-40% off. Pick it up. If you're waiting for something good to play, when this is on sale, buy it and play it. The first 15 minutes might be a little weird and boring. Once you get your telekinesis, it's game on. You're gonna be like, oh, I understand this game. It doesn't take that long. It is a little bit of a learning curve when you start, but once you get started, you're not going to want to come out of this game until you finish it, until you see the end. And it is one of those games that has that you need to finish multiple times to get the true story. So there is incentive to keep going back. There's more and more story, and there's more and more to do, more and more to unlock. And again, everything you do goes towards a bar that fills up and gives you points to unlock more things. So it has that incentive. It has that loop that is very addictive, and it's a fantastic game. So check out Synapse on PSVR2 and let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. Happy gaming.
Impressive, and I'm sure we're getting closer to stopping his attack. Next run, just push that little bit deeper. See if we can get the intel to stop him.
Advanced proficiency demonstrated. Awaiting operation.